Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're tackling the fascinating and honestly super unexpected true origins of US presidents. Because the path to the highest office in the land, it is rarely a straight line. If you think every president simply walked out of law school and directly into a local election, you are in for a major surprise. We're going to break down the highly varied, sometimes bizarre entry points into public life for the men who eventually became commander-in-chief. But first, we really have to ask ourselves a crucial question. Does being your high school class president actually count? Or what about serving as a military general? Well, to get to the real meat of the data, we're intentionally bypassing high school student government. Sure, it can spark an interest, but we are looking for true adult political involvement. We want to find that definitive moment when a future president stepped into the real-world political arena for the very first time. Okay, let's dive into this thematic roadmap. We'll define what a political start actually is, look at the teenage starters, check out those used pseudonyms, books, and ads, study the activists and legal advocates, explore the late bloomers, and finally, break it all down by the numbers. Section 1. Defining a political start. Because, let's face it, history is messy, and defining exactly what counts requires some ground rules. For our purposes here, a political start means adult involvement. Things like volunteering, activism, public appointments, and serious campus organizing. We're excluding traditional military service. The whole point is that gray areas are going to be judged on how they intersect with public administration. Like take George Washington's 1749 gig as a surveyor for Culpeper County. It sounds like an odd start, right? But in 18th century America, that was actually a highly prestigious government position that literally required him to be sworn in. That intersection with public administration is exactly what we're tracking. Section 2. The teenage political starters. Let's look at the guys who didn't wait until their 20s or 30s, but jumped in the absolute second they became adults. Now, what's really interesting about this is that we actually have a four-way tie for the youngest political start in presidential history. Martin Van Buren, Warren G. Harding, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Bill Clinton all got their start at exactly 18 years old. Van Buren went to a party convention as a delegate, Harding attended one as a young journalist, and Clinton interned for the Senate. But man, Lyndon B. Johnson's story perfectly illustrates the sheer power of early networking. Picture this. It's 1926, and an 18-year-old LBJ enrolls in college down in Texas. He doesn't just go to class. He immediately starts organizing debates, editing the school paper, and persuading his peers to join Democratic Party-aligned groups. You know, some folks might dismiss campus politics, but Johnson used his collegiate organizing to build massive real-world momentum. By 1931, he leveraged those exact connections to become a legislative secretary to a U.S. representative. So yeah, his campus organizing absolutely counts as a true start because it was a direct springboard into national politics. Section 3. Pseudonyms, books, and ads. Let's shift gears to the presidents who didn't run for office first, but instead used their writing and their wallets to gain influence. So it turns out political aliases totally run in the family. Both John Adams and his son John Quincy Adams identically began their careers by publishing political theories under fake names in their 20s. Back in 1763, at age 27, John Adams started publishing letters trashing the British colonial elite under the frankly hilarious pseudonym Humphrey Plowjogger. Fast forward a generation to 1791, and a 23-year-old John Quincy Adams uses the name Publica to argue against the French structure of government, like father, like son, using an alter ego and the press to completely shape public discourse. Moving from fake names to heavy academics, we have Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was an academic who served as the president of Princeton University. His totally unconventional entry into politics was publishing a book called Congressional Government at age 27. Sure, it served as his doctoral dissertation, but it was also this fiercely persuasive piece of political writing arguing that the legislature shouldn't be the most powerful branch of government. This book was literally his opening statement to the political world. And then, we have a totally different kind of publication. In 1987, at the age of 41, businessman Donald Trump spent over $100,000 on a full-page newspaper ad campaign. He ran these in major outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post. The ads heavily criticized U.S. foreign policy, specifically calling out nations like Japan and Saudi Arabia, and arguing that America should tax other nations for global protection to reduce the domestic deficit. Since he hadn't ever held public office or served in the military, making this significant financial purchase to broadcast a political platform marks his unique, official entry into the political sphere. Section 4. Activists and legal advocates. These are the future presidents who used the courtroom and grassroots protests to find their footing. Back in 1854, a 24-year-old private lawyer named Chester Arthur took on the case of Elizabeth Jennings Graham. She was a free African-American woman who was forcibly removed from a New York streetcar. While Arthur won this major civil rights lawsuit, and it directly led to the desegregation of New York City streetcars. Right around this exact same time, Rutherford B. Hayes was taking on similar, highly politicized private cases defending escaped slaves. For both of these men, these courtroom victories established their reputations with abolitionist movements and essentially kick-started their political careers. And this brilliantly illustrates the activist route too. In 1981, as a college sophomore, Barack Obama gave a speech protesting the apartheid regime in South Africa. As he noted decades later, he identifies this specific protest as his absolute first political action. It was the spark that ignited his path to the presidency. Section 5. The late bloomers. We've seen the teenagers and the 20-somethings, but what about the men who avoided politics for decades before finally jumping in? Take Herbert Hoover. He was a highly successful, wealthy mining engineer who wanted absolutely nothing to do with politics until he was 39 years old. At the onset of World War I, Hoover was living in London and saw thousands of American tourists stranded with no way to get home. So, he steps up and organizes a massive committee that helped over 100,000 Americans return safely. This incredible humanitarian effort caught the Wilson administration's attention. As Hoover later noted, August 3, 1914 was the day he accidentally catapulted himself onto the slippery road of public life. Dwight Eisenhower provides another fascinating gray area. He was a career military man. He even turned down Harry Truman's offer to run on the Democratic ticket in 1948. So when did he officially enter politics? Well, despite his military background, his time as the military governor of U.S.-occupied Germany in 1945, at the age of 54, was highly administrative. He had to oversee post-war reconstruction and the implementation of denazification policies. This massive administrative burden served as his true political start, perfectly prepping him for the Oval Office. And here we have the absolute extremes of the political runway side by side. Zachary Taylor entered politics at age 64 simply by running for president based on his status as a military hero. Get this, he had never even voted in a presidential election before. Compare that total lack of experience to Joe Biden, who entered politics in 1968 at age 26 by working with a local reform group in Delaware. That created a record-setting 51-year gap between his political start and his eventual election to the presidency. Talk about opposite ends of the spectrum. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 6, Origins by the Numbers. Now that we've explored all these unique paths, let's summarize the data from this explainer. When you look at all the presidents throughout U.S. history, 27.2 years old is the exact average age a future president begins publicly participating in the political world. This means, on average, a future president spends about 29 years grinding in the political sphere before finally ascending to the highest office in the land. Looking at the absolute records, we've got that four-way tie for the youngest start at 18. Meanwhile, Zachary Taylor holds the records for both the oldest start at 64 and the shortest gap, literally serving less than 1 year in the political realm before taking the presidency. And on the other extreme, Joe Biden holds the record for the longest gap at 51 years. Walking through this data really just proves there is no single formula for becoming president. Which leaves us with this final thought. Knowing how wildly diverse these origins are, from pseudonyms in 18th century newspapers to campus protests to newspaper ads and humanitarian relief, what unexpected place will the next generation's political origin story start? Is it going to be a viral social media post, a local zoning board, or a courtroom battle we haven't even seen yet? The blueprint for leadership is always changing, and I hope this explainer helped you see the brilliant, messy, and totally unpredictable reality of how history is actually made. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.